There are memories that never fade, no matter how hard you try to forget. For me, it was that April afternoon when I was 8 years old, the day my parents left and never came back. No tears, no final hugs, just a glance away, and the car disappearing down the end of the road. I thought I was staying for a few days. But those few days stretched into a decade. If you ever believed that family love is unconditional, let me tell you my story. The weather was warm that day, sunlight blanketing the wooden porch of my grandma's house in Greenville, South Carolina. I remember clearly because I was clutching a beige teddy bear, the only thing left untouched from my old home. My mom didn't look me in the eyes when she turned toward the back seat. Her voice was a whisper, as if speaking louder might break her. "We just need some time to think, Liv. Be good and stay with Grandma for a while, okay?" I didn't ask anything. I nodded. Something I had done so many times it had become second nature. I thought there would be a hug, a kiss on the forehead, a promise to return soon. But no. My dad glanced in the rearview mirror and then locked his eyes on the road ahead. As I stepped out of the car, my small backpack hanging off one shoulder, Grandma was already standing at the door. She gave me a gentle smile, but I saw the sadness in her eyes. She knew. She knew I wasn't being dropped off just for a few days. Before the car came to a full stop, I turned to look back, as if I moved fast enough, I could undo everything. But the moment I reached the porch steps, the car turned around and rolled down the driveway without stopping once. "Wait!" I shouted, my little legs chasing after it for a few steps, hoping the brake lights would flash, hoping my mom would roll down the window and say they forgot my sandals. Or forgot me. But no. The car disappeared, leaving only a haze of dust behind in the golden light of sunset. I stood still, heart pounding, fists clenched so tight my knuckles turned white. In that moment, I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or collapse. That first night at Grandma's, she made macaroni and cheese, my favorite, and even lit a small vanilla candle by the dining table. But I couldn't eat. Every time she asked, I just nodded and said, "It's good," then kept stirring my spoon through the plate without taking a bite. That night, when she turned off the lights and tucked me in, I turned toward the wall and bit my lip until it bled, trying not to make a sound. But when the darkness settled in, I couldn't hold it anymore. I buried my face in the pillow and sobbed like the world had ended. And for me, it had. The next morning, I ran to the window every time I heard a car on the street. I imagined my mom stepping out, holding a paper bag filled with snacks, saying she had just gone to get gas. But no one came. A week passed. Then, a month. I kept watching the window every afternoon, silent as unfamiliar cars drove by. I learned to count my heartbeat whenever I felt disappointed. 1, 2, 3. Then I'd go back to the dinner table or the corner of my room. No one mentioned my parents. No one called. No one wrote. One time, I asked, "Grandma, did Mom say anything?" She gently shook her head, her wrinkled hand resting on my shoulder. "It's not your fault, Olivia. Some people just aren't ready to be parents." But that didn't comfort me. How could an 8-year-old understand ready? I didn't need them to be ready. I just needed them to come back. I began to dread the holidays. On Christmas I wrote to Santa asking to see my mom. On my 9th birthday I wished for nothing but my dad to show up. But it never happened. Once, Grandma took me to my new school, and the teacher asked for parent contact information. I lowered my head, unable to answer. Grandma had to hand over a guardianship form. I saw the pity in the adult's eyes, felt the light pats on my back. I hated it. I didn't want pity. I wanted my family. But as I grew older, I understood. They didn't go anywhere, they just didn't want me. And that's the most brutal thing a child can learn. That sometimes, the people who are supposed to love you the most, are the first ones to leave. I used to believe that what's broken could never be whole again. But Grandma Eleanor proved me wrong, in ways no one else ever had, with her unwavering presence, the warm hand she placed on my forehead every morning, and her constant belief in me, even when I couldn't believe in myself. She was the principal of Lakewood High School. A woman with neatly combed silver hair, always perfectly pressed blouses, and a voice that could silence an entire classroom with just one glance. But inside her small house in southern Greenville, she wasn't Principal Eleanor Rivers. She was the only one who sat beside me every night, patiently going over math homework, even when I got it all wrong. No one's born great, Olivia. But anyone can become great if they don't give up. Her voice was never loud, but always firm, and to me, it was stronger than any yelling in the world. Our mornings began at 6. She brewed coffee and read the Wall Street Journal, while I sat at the table, finishing homework I hadn't completed the night before. While my classmates watched cartoons, she showed me stock market updates. I didn't understand a thing at 9 years old, but she said, "Just read it. One day, you won't need anyone to explain it to you." And she was right. I still remember the first time she took me to the public library. Her hand rested gently on my shoulder as I stood hesitantly in front of the science section, where 2 boys sneered at me. "You want to know why rainbows have colors, right?" she asked. I nodded, still trembling. She bent down, eyes serious. "Then don't let anyone tell you that curiosity is shameful. Questions are a torch, Olivia. The smartest person isn't the one with all the answers, but the one who never stops asking." From that day on, I fell in love with physics. She bought me a small science kit, not a colorful toy set, but one that could actually burn your hand if you weren't careful. She didn't stop me. She taught me caution and how to respect knowledge. Every time I made a mistake, she didn't scold me or sigh. She simply asked, "What did you learn from this?" We didn't have much money. She still drove an old 2002 Ford with no A/seat that had to be started by tapping the steering wheel 3 times. Our house had only 2 bedrooms and worn-out furniture. But I never felt poor. Because she gave me something no one else could buy. The feeling of being seen, heard, and believed in. Once, I got an F in history for forgetting to turn in a paper. I was so scared I considered forging her signature on the notice. But when she found out, she didn't get angry. She just sat down and looked me in the eyes. You can choose the easy way and escape blame, or you can choose to face it, fix it, and learn something most smart kids miss: character. I rewrote the paper and turned it in. The next week I got an A. Not out of pity, but because I had truly earned it. That's how she taught me, not with punishments or prizes, but by showing me how to live with worth, even if no one else saw it but me. People often say, "I wish I had a better mom." As for me, I just needed Grandma Eleanor. Every time someone asks, "Where are your parents?" I no longer lower my head. I say, "I don't know, but I have a grandmother who's good enough for all 3 of them." When I was 10, she signed me up for free piano lessons at church. Not because she wanted me to become a musician, she simply said, "Music teaches patience. Patience helps you go far." Every night before bed, Grandma would come into my room, fix my blanket and pillow, and place her hand over my chest. "Your heart's still beating, that means you can start over anytime." Every time I fell, she'd ask, "Do you want to stay down or get back up?" Every time I cried, she'd ask, "Are you crying to give up? Or to let go and keep going?" I grew up in a strictness that was never cold, in a love that never needed frills, and in an education whose worth I only realized looking back. Grandma never promised me an easy future. She simply showed me that I could own it. And then, when I was 13, I did something that made her cry, for the first time. Not out of sadness. It was when I won first place in the state science fair with a model for a low-cost water filtration system for rural communities. She sat in the very back row, saying nothing. Just gripped my hand tightly when I came down from the stage, my face still flushed with nerves. "That's my granddaughter," she whispered, eyes wet, but smile shining. "You're just getting started, Olivia, and you'll go farther than anyone who ever left you." I used to think that kids like me, abandoned, without parents, living in a small worn-out house with a retired grandmother, would never be anything in the eyes of the world. Until the day the name Olivia Rivers echoed across a packed auditorium at the South Carolina State Science Fair, when I was 13. I nearly froze. I couldn't believe my ears when the host announced, loudly, "This year's first place award goes to the Project Affordable Biofilter for Low-Income Communities, by Olivia Rivers, student at Lakewood Middle School." My heart pounded so hard it felt like my chest might burst. I stood up, feet barely touching the ground, walking onto the stage through a wave of applause. The trophy wasn't heavy in my hands, but when I turned to find Grandma Eleanor in the crowd, my eyes blurred with tears. She stood at the back of the auditorium, in a simple purple dress, hands clasped, lips trembling but eyes glowing. She didn't jump. She didn't scream. But I knew inside her was a storm of emotion. That night, Grandma and I returned home in silence. Not because there was nothing to say, but because no words could contain the joy flooding the air. But when I stepped inside the house, I froze. The dining table was fully set, lasagna, the dish she made only for special occasions, desserts, string lights across the living room. A white poster hung between two windows, scrawled in red marker. "My granddaughter, state champion." She had invited my science teacher, a few close friends from class, even the school librarian, the one who helped me find books on water microbes. "You didn't think I could throw a party, huh?" she laughed when I stood there, mouth wide open. I hugged her tightly, nearly knocking off her reading glasses. "Thank you for everything." She stroked my hair. "No, Olivia, I just walked beside you. You were the one who moved forward. That party didn't have a DJ, no strobe lights, no 3-tier cake. But it had laughter echoing through the house, proud glances, and sincere pats on the back. For the first time, I didn't feel like the kid who was left behind. I was a girl stepping out of her own shadow. And in that very moment, sitting in a room full of people who cared for me, I realized something more important than any award. I no longer needed to sit by the window each afternoon, waiting for a car that would never return. I didn't need to imagine a hug that never happened. I didn't need to hope my parents would someday see my worth. I already had a family, not perfect, but real. Late that night, when everyone had left, Grandma sat with me in the quiet kitchen, poured me a warm glass of milk, and asked softly, "How do you feel?" I didn't have to think long. "I feel like I just won something bigger than the contest." She nodded slowly. "That's right. You just won back your belief in yourself." From that day forward, I stopped letting the past control my heart, the questions that haunted me for years. Why did they leave me? What did I do wrong? Became distant echoes, no longer able to hold power over me. I dove into my studies, not to prove anything to my parents, but to prove to myself that I was worthy of every bit of Grandma Eleanor's encouragement. I learned to speak confidently in front of a crowd, to share my projects during school panels. That quiet little Olivia from years ago had learned to hold her head high, to speak her dreams aloud, to show up. Still, I never forgot what Grandma once taught me. Success isn't just being recognized, it's knowing where you came from and choosing never to forget it. So every time I walk into a classroom, I still wear the old button-up shirt Grandma once tailored for me and the necklace she gave me for my 13th birthday, a silver chain with a pendant shaped like an old-fashioned key. She had only said, "One day you'll know what it unlocks." I giggled then, thinking it was a joke. Now I'm not so sure. Maybe she always knew that my first success was only the beginning. She never told me she loved me with fancy words. She loved me by teaching me how to tie my shoes tight, how to argue respectfully, how not to cry in front of someone who once hurt me. And maybe that's the greatest kind of love I've ever known. A love without conditions, without birth certificates, without shared blood. Just a daily choice to stay. I turned 18 on a brilliant fall afternoon, sunlight spilling across the small garden where Grandma Eleanor used to plant chrysanthemums in lavender. The breeze was cool, but her gaze was warm, just like the first day she welcomed a frightened 8-year-old girl out of a strange car. She had made a dinner reservation at the Mason Garden, the place she once called the spot, to celebrate real milestones. Not fancy, but every corner held a memory. From the worn leather booths to the hanging wooden lavender chandeliers. It was a cozy party, just a few close friends, teachers who had guided me through science projects, and Dr. Kate, the doctor who treated my broken arm when I was 12. After everyone sang happy birthday and finished slices of her special apple pie, Grandma stood up and pulled a reddish-brown velvet box from her coat pocket. "This is your birthday gift," she said, her voice calm but commanding the room to silence. I opened the box. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a finely carved key pendant. On the back, barely visible unless held to the light, was a tiny inscription. "Trust when the time comes." I looked up, puzzled. "What does it open, Grandma?" She simply smiled, a smile both mysterious and gentle. "Well, day, you'll know." I didn't ask further. Somehow, there was something in her eyes that made me not want to break the sacredness hanging between us. I wore the necklace that night, and haven't taken it off since. 3 months later, on what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, my world collapsed. I had just left my applied biology class at Greenville Community College when I got a call from an unknown number. The man's voice on the other end was shaky but clear. "Miss Olivia Rivers? This is Dr. Owens from St. Jude Hospital. I am very sorry. Your grandmother passed away from a sudden heart attack." I was frozen. No final words, no warning signs. Grandma Eleanor, the woman stronger than any storm I had ever known, was gone. In just a matter of minutes. I gripped my phone so tightly my knuckles went numb. I didn't blink. My ears rang. The wind outside was biting cold, but I felt nothing except the erratic thumping of my heart. By the time I got to the hospital, she had already been moved to the cold room. I couldn't look. I couldn't take another step. A young nurse placed her hand on my shoulder, soft as mist. She went very quickly, no pain, she just fell asleep. I didn't cry right then. I just turned away and sat down on a pale bench in the hallway, still clutching the necklace with the key pendant. Trust when the time comes. Was this the moment she meant? The days that followed blurred like a foggy dream. I handled the funeral arrangements, chose her favorite flowers, lavender and white chrysanthemums, and wrote the eulogy even though my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The turnout was unexpectedly large. Former students, former teachers, neighbors, even people I'd never met, all arriving with flowers, red-eyed, sharing stories about Grandma I had never heard before. She paid my senior year tuition without ever leaving her name. Principal Rivers was the only one who believed I could go back to school after I got expelled. My mother was sick and Eleanor was the one sending hospital money every month, under the name A Caring Friend. I sat in the front row, hands clenched around my necklace, tears streaming down. I had lost everything. My family, even if it was just one person, was now gone too. When the funeral ended, I returned to the little house with the white picket fence, where I'd lived for the past decade. Everything was just the same. The blanket still neatly folded, the books still on the shelf. The teacup she always used still had a lipstick stain on its rim. But she wasn't there. That night, I sat alone in the living room, no lights on, no TV. I just sat there, quietly, my fingers tracing the silver key pendant on my chest. And then I whispered, "Grandma, I'm not ready." No reply, only silence, thick and absolute, swallowing every echo like the night itself. But in that exact moment, somewhere deep within, I heard what she had always taught me. You don't need to be ready to begin. You only need enough courage not to step back. Grandma Eleanor's funeral was held on a cloudy Saturday morning, just like she once said. A life should be honored under a calm sky without fuss. St. Clair's church was small but filled to the brim, former students, colleagues, neighbors, even strangers who had once been quietly helped by her. I sat in the front pew wearing a simple black dress and the necklace she gave me on my 18th birthday. My hands gripped the eulogy, printed on recycled paper. Something she always encouraged to protect the environment. As the pastor's voice faded, people rose one by one to offer their condolences. I hadn't even stood yet when the atmosphere shifted, as though someone had opened a door and let cold wind flood straight into my chest. I turned around. And I saw them. My parents. I didn't recognize them at first. 10 years is enough for once familiar faces to become strangers. My mother, Stephanie, now had crow's feet around her eyes, her brown hair highlighted with pale blonde, and wore a black dress that seemed more chosen for social impression than grief. My father, Travis, entered looking composed but stiff. He wore a suit and black tie, but his eyes, those eyes I remembered too well, not an ounce of remorse. I stood still. They walked toward me, like stepping out of a warped old dream. My mother reached out, her voice, feather light. "Olivia, you've grown so much." I stepped back. Not out of shock, but because I felt something was wrong. There was something cold, vacant and hollow in the way they looked at me. Not the eyes of parents who had searched for their daughter for 10 long years. "We're very sorry about Eleanor," my father added, trying to inject emotion into his tone. "We came as soon as we heard." I didn't respond. I just stared at them like they were strangers intruding on a sacred moment not meant for them. And then what I had feared, and expected, came. Even quicker than I thought. "You'll be coming home with us, won't you?" my mother asked, her voice no longer soft but switching into that familiar tone. Commanding, with a hint of annoyance. "You're still under 18, aren't you?" my father added. "We're still your legal guardians." I stood motionless. It felt like someone had thrown a rock into my chest, and the icy ripples kept crashing inside me. Not one word about how I'd lived the past 10 years. Not a single pause for apology or uncertainty. They got straight to the point, as if I were just a document, or an asset, to be swiftly dealt with. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, my voice hoarse. My mother frowned. "Olivia, don't be childish. You're our daughter. Family is where you belong." I laughed. A dry, hollow laugh, even I didn't recognize it coming from myself. "Family," I echoed. For 10 years I waited at the window every afternoon. 10 years. And now you show up. Not for me. But for what she left behind. "Don't speak like that, Olivia," my father said, his tone tightening with frustration. "We both know she left behind assets. She was my mother. I have a right." I didn't move. I simply reached into my pocket and pulled out the envelope Grandma's lawyer, Mr. James Whitmore, had handed me just before the ceremony. "I think you should wait until the will is read. For now, I suggest you both step back. This is not a stage for your performance." My mother's face went pale, though she tried to maintain a polite smile. "You're misunderstanding. We just want to be here for you." I looked her straight in the eyes. "If that were true, you would have come sooner, not waited until she passed and rumors about money started to spread." I turned away, offering no more words. As I walked forward, my heart no longer trembled like before. The grief of losing Grandma was still there, dull and heavy. But it wasn't alone anymore. It was joined by anger, by clarity, and by a resolve not to let the people who once abandoned me lay a hand on anything that belonged to Eleanor. Not her money, not her legacy, and especially not me. The funeral ended in silence. I didn't look back. But I knew, this time, I was the one leaving them behind. Right after the ceremony, I was invited into a small room behind the church used for private parish meetings. The air inside was heavy, as if the gray wooden walls had absorbed too many bitter truths over the years. My parents were already there, seated on either side of a long wooden table, their eyes darting between the door and the neatly stacked documents across from them. They looked at me as if I were the outsider. But the truth was, they were the ghosts now. trying to force their way into a chapter that no longer belonged to them. Grandma's attorney, Mr. James Whitmore, stood by the window, adjusting his glasses. A tall man in his early 50s, calm in demeanor but with eyes sharp as blades. He nodded when he saw me, then motioned for me to sit beside him. "Thank you all for being here," he said, voice deep and steady but firm. "We will now begin the reading of Eleanor Rivers' last will and testament." My father. Travis arched an eyebrow and leaned back in his chair as if bracing to receive a hefty inheritance. My mother. Stephanie tightened her grip on her purse, eyes locked on the briefcase in front of Mr. Whitmore. He placed his hand on the file and opened to the first page. The will was written 5 years ago and was last updated and notarized 8 months ago. Before I read the main provisions, I need to confirm one important detail. He turned to me. "Olivia, are you wearing the necklace your grandmother gave you?" I was slightly surprised but then reached up, pulled the silver chain from beneath my shirt and let the pendant swing in the air. He nodded. "Good, then we can proceed." My parents exchanged confused glances. My father spoke first. "Excuse me, what does that key have to do with the distribution of assets?" "I'll explain," James replied, his voice cool and controlled. He carefully flipped to the second page, then began to read. His voice filled the room, clear and resolute. "I, Eleanor Rivers, being of sound mind and of my own free will, declare that all my assets, including real estate, bank accounts, investment portfolios, and full ownership of the Rivers Educational Foundation, shall be transferred in entirety to my only granddaughter, Olivia Rivers." No one spoke for a few seconds. Then suddenly, "What?" my mother shrieked, springing up from her chair. "That's impossible. We're her biological children." My father slammed his hand on the table. "There must be some mistake. A minor can't possibly manage an estate of that size." James remained unmoved. He pulled out another folder from his briefcase, placed it gently on the table, and slid it toward them. "This is a certified copy of the legal guardianship termination signed by both of you 10 years ago, along with the court approval transferring full custody of Olivia to Mrs. Eleanor." I saw my mother's face drain of color. She snatched the papers, flipping through them with shaking hands. Her face looked bloodless. My father froze, then let out a bitter laugh. "She forced us to sign that. She must have manipulated the court so she could keep Olivia to herself." James shook his head. "No, all documentation is legitimate with witnesses and approved by a South Carolina judge. There is no indication of coercion or legal misconduct." "And what if we sue?" my mother hissed, eyes red, not with sorrow but with rage. James replied instantly, without hesitation. "You're welcome to try, but I'm afraid Mrs. Eleanor prepared every detail with utmost care. All assets have already been transferred into a trust, in Olivia's name before her death. You will not be able to touch a cent." I looked over at my parents. But there was no remorse in their eyes. Only disappointment that they had failed to claim the prize. I clenched the necklace in my hand, then spoke. For the first time since entering the room. "You left me when I was 8. No phone call, no explanation. She raised me, she believed in me, and now? You only show up when there's a cent of money?" "Olivia, you're being manipulated," my mother interrupted. "She filled your head with things that aren't true." I stood up. "No one filled my head with anything. What I know came from 10 years of your silence." Then I turned to James. "I want to proceed as she wished." He nodded, his eyes softening. "She also left you a private letter. But that's for later. For now, the legal matter is resolved. I believe this meeting should conclude." No one objected. My parents rose, gathering their things in silence. As they walked out of the room, my mother tossed one last line over her shoulder. "You'll regret turning your back on your family." "Your eyes," I replied softly, without looking back. "I'm not turning my back on family. I'm walking away from the ones who did it first." The door closed, and for the first time in days of grief, I no longer felt like a lost child. I was Olivia Rivers, and I was ready for everything ahead. I thought the reading of the will would be the end of it. I had hoped they would understand, accept, and return to the selfish world they had chosen 10 years ago. But I had underestimated greed. The one thing that had never run dry in their hearts. Just 3 days later, I received a notice from James's law office. My parents had filed a petition with the court to invalidate the will, citing concerns that Eleanor may have been psychologically manipulated prior to her death. I let out a bitter laugh as I listened to James read those lines over the phone. They think they can trample both truth and law just because they don't like the outcome, I said. James's voice lowered. You don't need to worry. We have all the evidence. But they won't stop anytime soon. And he was right. On a local news site, I saw a sensational headline. 18-year-old girl accused of manipulating grandmother's estate. Below it was a photo of me stepping out of the church, eyes swollen from crying, lips pressed tight. My mother, Stephanie, appeared in the article with the caption, "We just want our daughter to have a real family. We lost our parental rights because of the manipulations of her grandmother." I read every word, rage surging through me like wildfire in my veins. Not only lies, they had made themselves the victims. I called James immediately. I want to speak out, publicly, clearly. I've been silent for too long. And so I did. At a press conference held at the Rivers Educational Foundation, where I had just been appointed honorary chair, I stood before dozens of reporters, cameras, and a storm of flashing lights. I wore a charcoal blazer, and the key pendant around my neck glinted in the spotlight. I didn't read from a script, I spoke from my heart. My name is Olivia Rivers. I am the only granddaughter of Eleanor Rivers, the woman who raised me since I was 8 years old, when my biological parents left me at her doorstep, without a single explanation. The room was silent. I continued. For 10 years, I didn't receive a single call, message, or letter from them. I grew up in love, discipline, and trust, given to me by my grandmother. And when she passed, they showed up. Not to share in the grief, but to claim what they never contributed to: money, honor, and power. I paused, then looked straight into the camera. I am no longer the child they left behind. Now, I am the one who revokes their right to call me family. That afternoon, as I was about to leave the office, the front desk called. Ms. Rivers. There are 2 people demanding to see you. They say they're your parents. I went to the lobby. And there they stood. Stephanie and Travis. Gone was the usual confidence. My mother was heavily made up, but her lips were tight with tension. My father wore a wrinkled dress shirt, clutching a stack of disorganized papers. Probably rejected appeals. Olivia, my mother began, her voice softer than usual. We need to talk. I folded my arms, standing tall, without inviting them in. You have nothing to say to me. My father cut in. This is family, sweetheart. We shouldn't be tearing each other apart like this. I laughed, a sharp, cold sound unlike any I had made before. Family, you cut me out of your lives for 10 years, and now you're using the media to smear me. That's what you call family? We were wrong, my mother said, her voice beginning to crack. But who doesn't make mistakes? I stepped closer, looking her straight in the eye. The difference is, some people make mistakes and fix them, others make mistakes and just get worse. My father clenched his fists. We gave you life, no one can replace that. I pulled the silver key from around my neck and held it at eye level. Grandma Eleanor didn't replace anyone. She chose me. Every day, every moment. You chose to leave, and now, I choose to leave you. My mother whispered, almost pleading. You'll regret turning your back on blood. I took a deep breath. No. You'll regret ever thinking I'd stay silent. I turned and walked away, without looking back. This time, it wasn't them walking away like 10 years ago. This time, I was the one leaving, with my head held high, and not a trace of regret in my heart. 1 week after the press conference, I returned to Eleanor's home, where everything remained as it had been when she was alive. The wall clock still ran 3 minutes fast. The lavender by the window had clearly been watered every afternoon, and the cream-colored porcelain tea set still sat on the table, as if she had just stepped out to pick fresh mint from the garden. In her study, Attorney James Whitmore inserted a small silver USB drive into his laptop. The screen lit up with the words, "Only open when Olivia is ready." I swallowed hard. My hands were cold, but I nodded. James clicked play. The screen brightened, and there she was. Eleanor, clearer than any memory I had ever clung to. She wore a striped blouse, her silver hair neatly pinned back, her eyes bright but deep, as though she were looking through time itself. Straight into my heart. "Olivia, if you're watching this video, then things have unfolded exactly as I predicted," she began, her voice calm but full of emotion. "I'm sorry I couldn't say this to you while I was alive, but some things are meant to be said at the right moment." I sat up straight, fingers tightening around the key pendant, waves stirring deep inside me. "You've always wondered about that key, haven't you?" She smiled gently. "It doesn't open a safe. It doesn't unlock a secret room. It opens another kind of door. A door I've spent my life preparing for you to walk through." The video shifted to clips. Children at a care center, pale but with bright eyes. Then footage of a row of small offices in an old industrial area. The faded sign reading, "Rivers Foundation for Abandoned Children." Her voice continued. "For many years, I've quietly built the Rivers Foundation, using profits from my investments and company to support shelters, foster centers, and scholarships for abandoned children across the state. No one knew who was behind it. And now, I want you to take it over." I was stunned. The screen returned to her face, serious but filled with pride. "I didn't just leave you money, Olivia, I left you a legacy, a responsibility, an opportunity to change lives, the way yours was once changed." I bowed my head, my chest ached, not from pressure, but from a sudden, overwhelming understanding. For the first time, I realized why she had raised me the way she did. Every lesson, every moment of patience, every whispered reminder in the night. Not to make me smart, but to make me strong enough to carry this. 1 month later, I officially assumed the role of Chief Executive Officer of the Rivers Foundation, according to the terms of the will. At first, many members of the board were skeptical. I was an 18-year-old girl with no college degree and no executive experience. But I walked into that first meeting wearing the lavender blazer my grandmother had once worn when presenting to the State Education Board back in 1998. I had found it in her old closet. And when I spoke, I didn't read from a script. I spoke from memory, from gratitude, from a deep understanding of every child who had ever been forgotten. I spoke about myself. About the little girl who used to sit waiting by the window. About the ache in her chest when no one came back. About the one woman who chose to love me unconditionally. And about the mission I carry now, to make sure no child ever has to wait the way I once did. When I finished, the room fell silent. Then the first person to clap was Mrs. Helen, the financial advisor who had worked with Eleanor for over 2 decades. Her eyes welled up. "I see Eleanor in you. And I know we're putting this mission in the right hands." I didn't upgrade my car. Grandma's old Ford still sat in the garage. I'd just changed the oil regularly and kept the cinnamon essential oil she always used. I didn't move into a mansion. I stayed in the little house with the white fence. The place where dreams had first begun to bloom. I didn't hire bodyguards. I drove myself to the centers, walked with the children to the park, told bedtime stories before they fell asleep. I used my own money to open 3 additional branches of the foundation, in Charleston, Columbia, and a small town near the Georgia border, where statistics showed the highest rate of child abandonment in the state. Each time I signed off on a scholarship or an expansion plan, I remembered her words. "True wealth isn't about how much you own, it's about what you choose to create." One afternoon as I left the new branch office, an 8-year-old boy tugged at my hand. "Miss Olivia, are you the one who built this place?" I knelt to his level and smiled. No, sweetheart, a wonderful grandmother built it. I'm just the one keeping her flame alive. He nodded thoughtfully, then whispered. I wish I had a grandma like yours. I gently squeezed his shoulder. You do now. And from this moment on, you won't be left behind again. Around my neck, the silver key still hung quietly, not a mystery anymore, but a reminder. I'm not just an heir to a fortune. I'm the keeper of a mission. And I am Olivia Rivers. The girl who was once abandoned. Now a place where others can begin again. Olivia's story is not just a journey from pain to healing, it's a powerful testament to the strength of unconditional love and quiet resilience. From an abandoned child, Olivia rose not only to defend her own dignity, but to inherit and expand the noble mission her grandmother left behind. She chose not revenge, but to build a future rooted in compassion and tangible action. The greatest lesson? Sometimes, real family isn't defined by blood, but by those who choose to stay when everyone else has walked away. What do you think about Olivia's decision? Do you believe she should forgive her parents? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, powerful stories about family and life.